I was reading a story that reminded me of an event from over 20 years ago. In the second half of 1998, I had taken a job as a security guard at a plant that made locks. Being a kid, I usually worked one of three shifts: 4 p.m. to 12 a.m., 7:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., or 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. The 7:30 to 3:30 shift was for extra coverage, so there were always two of us there from 7:30 to midnight. It was a routine, boring job for the most part. We did our rounds, logged anything out of the ordinary, and watched a tiny monitor displaying the CCTV feed. Things went by in an almost painfully normal manner for 6 months. I worked, saved, bought a car, and planned to move. By late March of '99, I served my notice and prepared to head cross-country. A new hire was brought in to fill my spot, a soft-spoken man named Calvin. As part of his training, Calvin spent time working at all hours. At night, he was a shadow, working with myself and the other night guard, getting a feel for the plant's nocturnal routines. Most nights he worked with myself and Amira, a female guard who was around my age. I was 18 at the time. Calvin, who was about a decade older, was quiet and polite, though something seemed to be missing. There's a spark that genuinely nice people seem to have, and he didn't possess it. Whenever he went on rounds with me, he'd ask questions about the job and make small talk. I noticed that he was a little odd, laughed at odd times and changing his tone mid-sentence. At the time, I chalked it up to him being awkward. That wouldn't last. One night near the end of his first week, he went on rounds with Amira. When they returned to the office, I knew something was wrong. Normally talkative, she would barely say a word. Not sure what had occurred, I waited until Calvin had gone to the restroom to ask. During their trip, everything had been normal until they reached the brass mill, a portion of the plant that was shut down at 6 p.m. There were usually no employees there after that time and no lights. They were making their way to a checkpoint on a landing atop a flight of stairs when the mood shifted. She told me that he turned around only to find that he was right on her. Startled, she backed up against the grating at the end of the landing and he leaned in towards her, his face nearly touching hers. He flirted in a low voice, and when she mentioned his wedding band, he said it would be over soon. From then on, I did my rounds taking Calvin with me each time. The night ended without any further incident, and I left a note for our supervisor detailing what had occurred. The next night came and went with no Calvin. I did the rounds while Amira stayed in the locked office. Same thing the night after. Then on my second to last shift, I come in to find her freaking out. She found out why Calvin hadn't been at work. He had been arrested for murdering his wife. She had been dismembered and burned, parts of her bodies placed in a pond less than a mile from where we worked. That night and the next, Amira called the jail just to make sure that they were still holding him. Based on the time frame, he killed his wife months before he started the job. This happened about 3 years ago, right at the height of Pokemon Go's popularity. I played it regularly with my fiancé, Luke. We decided to get clever, and instead of walking to make our eggs grow or whatever, I would just drive around the residential streets slowly at about 15 miles per hour. We always drove the same path, and we did this several times. At the time, we lived in a very small one-traffic light town. The town was primarily low-income families. We usually played Pokemon at around 10 to 11 p.m., as did several other locals. Without other entertainment, it was a fairly popular game around town. This particular night, I'm driving the normal path with Luke. We're catching a sick Pokemon left and right, and hatching eggs like crazy. We paused in the water department's parking lot to catch our 2/17th Ekans. We drive for about 10 minutes more and park next to an empty lot. Across the street is a normal residential landscape with houses and whatnot. I'm catching my first Pikachu, stoked as fuck, and some guy drives by in a beat-up silver SUV. He slows down and asks me if I'm okay. I smiled and flashed my phone screen and told him we were playing Pokemon. He said something like, "Oh, okay. Have a good one." but he seemed weird. I don't know. But I was about to. So we leave and make our last loop around the neighborhood, pausing as we go to collect various Pokemon. About 15 minutes later, we're back by the empty parking lot because there's another Pokemon. Suddenly, the house across the street starts pointing beams of light at me. Very small and bright. It was weird, so Luke and I noped out of there. As soon as we did, the beat-up SUV is behind me. I didn't even know where it came from. I turn onto the main road to head home. I didn't even realize anything was wrong at first. He pulls up next to me and I can only see a male driving and a female passenger. The driver is shining a blinding light at me through his window as we drive. At this point, I'm simply pissed. I keep asking Luke what this guy's fucking problem is and telling him to tell the guy to fuck off, all the while I'm becoming petrified. I'm a confident person, but I am not a confident driver and I have no idea why these people are messing with us. But I do know it's the same guy that asked if we were okay earlier. I don't want to drive home because I don't want to lead these people to my house, but I had no idea what to do. I decided to drive to the police station, but there was no one there. Parking lot empty, lights off. We have 2 police officers, so they both must have been out patrolling. I was shook. I was raised in a large city, so tiny town living and no police at a police station was so foreign to me. I had no clue what to do, so I drove to the little hospital and managed to lose them. My fiancé and I immediately changed seats without speaking. We sat there for about 15 seconds and then pulled out. Giggity. He's behind us again, and he's aggressive. I called 911 at this point and began crying to dispatch, telling them a crazy guy's following us. At this point, Luke is flying through the town at random. He's running red lights, speeding 70+ miles per hour in residential areas, tearing through people's lawns. This was seriously as insane as it sounds. Everywhere we went, he went too. Every time we sped up, he did too. We had no idea what he wanted, but we knew he wanted to hurt us. We could feel it. At one point, we're tearing through yards in my car, no fences, and the guy manages to box us in. I'm still on my phone with 911. We are stuck between his car and copse of trees. Immediately upon stopping, the guy jumps out, as does his female passenger and 2 very large male passengers in the back seat. Luke immediately pulls out his gun, points it at them, and screams, "Get the fuck back! Get the fuck back!" And they all bolt back to their vehicle and take off. I am absolutely shaking and sobbing at this point, talking to 911, and the lady finally asks me where I want to meet the cops. I tell her the local gas station. We're there within 20 seconds, as are the cops. This town is seriously so little. I don't know how the cops didn't see us or intervene while we were destroying dozens of yards at midnight and drove extremely fast and recklessly. Seconds after we pulled up, so does the SUV. The guy jumps out and begins to rush my car. The cops stop him. They talk to him for a while, and we're just sitting in our car shaking. Older cop finally walks up to us and says, "So, did one of you pull a gun on them tonight?" We were shocked. This was the only thing he asked. We told him yes, explained everything that had happened. Cop went and talked to him again, came back and basically said that the guy thought we were casing his house because he kept seeing our vehicle pass. The cop told us we were lucky that he decided not to press charges since Luke pulled the gun. My car had a decent amount of damage from driving through trees and bushes and shit, scratched up, pretty sure the guys were going to beat our asses, and the cops tell us we are lucky. We were so scared and shaken up. We didn't argue anything and left when they allowed us to. But not before they ran all our info and made us feel like criminals, like we were childish and stupid for playing Pokemon. The cops openly laughed at us. We went home and stayed up literally all night, taking turns peeking out the window. We were convinced these guys were going to drive around, find my car, and harass us. The next day, we had a high-tech security system installed. I have since seen the guy and the girl several times. I work at a school and they have young children. I had never seen or interacted with them prior to this day or after. But I know they knew who I was. So I'm glad I don't live there anymore. I also never played Pokemon Go after that night. I should also mention that I understand why the guy thought what he did, but I do not think his reaction was justifiable. This happened within the last 24 hours. I live in a large city in the US. Like many people, I have taken it on myself to try and get back in shape during the new year, so I've recently gone into running and lifting 5 days a week. Yesterday was a run day for me. I usually start at my apartment and cross over this long park that continues along the river close to my apartment. The park is filled with sports fields, tennis courts, and many runners along the pathway. I've been going 2 to 3 times a week for just over a month. I was on my run last night listening to a podcast minding my own business, and I decided to go a little further than I normally do, to this longer stretch where the park kinda sorta ends for like half a mile before it picks back up. Kind of like an area where they park equipment. Many people avoid this area due to it not being waterfront and ugly. I decided to run to the end of this area before circling back home. As I'm running, I see a man 200 or so feet in front of me making his way my direction. Not unusual at all. I've passed like 40 people already. But this area is empty except him and I, as most people circle back. Still, I ride my bike here to commute from work and have never gotten weird vibes. I'm also an average build man and feel pretty secure most places in my relatively safe neighborhood. I keep running, listening to my podcast, when I notice this man's path is directly in line with me, as if I continue 150 more feet I'd run into him. So I shift to the other side of the path, 10 or so feet, keep running and not paying attention. Looking back, and he's in my path again. Still no alarms. Maybe he shifted or got out of the way, and we both went the same way. So I shift back to the side I started on. I watch him. He shifts to my side. I'm thinking this guy's fucking with me. I'm 50 feet away, and between there, 20 feet keeps shifting more and more quickly. He follows me exactly to the point he sidestepped instead of moving forward, waiting for me to reach him. At this point, I take his presence, and he's 6'3" at the shortest, in jeans and a black hoodie with a hood up. I can't really make out his face due to a streetlight behind him casting a shadow. I begin to realize, oh fuck. I come to a stop and pull my headphones out and begin the sentence. What the fuck, man? I get to when he raises both arms above his head and begins to scream at me. No legible words that I can hear over my podcast. I do notice he has something long, white beige in his hands. At this point, I begin to backtrack, keeping my eyes on him. All of a sudden, he dashes towards me, running with his arms stretched out to grab me. I turn and hightail it the other way. It should be known I'm not in the best of shape. I've had numerous injuries requiring surgeries, and I've done just about 75% of my intended run for the night, but I've never run faster. He kept pace and closed much of the distance, but when we started to go slightly uphill, I continued to make ground. We came to a fork in the path after about a minute of this. The two paths circled around a fenced area containing the construction vehicles, mowers, etc. I made it look like I was going one way, and at the last moment I dashed the other way. The paths kinda made a circle, so I was able to get far enough away so he couldn't see me via the fence and bushes. And when I felt like it was my chance, I dove into a bush, clawed my way under the fence, and crawled through the space and under the side of the fence. He kept looking for me in the bushes, prowling back and forth, and finally saw me on the other side of the enclosure. At this point, I was already on the phone with police trying to get help as I gulped down breaths of air. I was also warning runners. He eventually just followed my pace opposite side of the fence. He kept ducking into darker areas around the enclosure, and eventually I lost sight of him. I began getting worried again and kept wandering around, warning people that I was waiting on the cops. After about 15 minutes of not seeing him, I pieced the fuck out of there as the cops say they were close. The jog home was horrible, and any time a runner passed me, I had a mini panic attack. I was in shock and running off adrenaline the remainder of the night. I'm not really sure what happened or what was going on. It felt like I was in a movie. Today I checked the Citizen app and Twitter to see if anything had happened, and I'm not sure if it's related, it most likely isn't, but 5 hours after I called the cops, they pulled the body of a man out of a river a mile or two down from where the attempted attack occurred. Close to 10 years ago, my best mate and I scored the deal of a century. Live-in with her parents' recently purchased and refurbished house for cheap as chips rent, so the property wasn't considered unoccupied and their insurance still covered it. They were planning on selling their house in the country and moving closer to town in a year, but when they spotted this place, it was perfect, so they snapped it up. They couldn't be bothered dealing with the rando tenants for a year, so we were offered it. Swing! That's what they said, swing. It was a lovely old mid-Victorian style house with a hallway running the majority of the length of the left side and 3 bedrooms and a bathroom coming off of that hallway to the right. At the back of the house there was an open-plan living room and a kitchen and a backyard. It was in an inner Melbourne suburb, so it was totally fenced in with 6 foot on 3 sides, and in the front had a courtesy white picket fence. On the right side of the property, an outdoor gravel pathway was wedged beside the bedroom walls and the fence line. It began with a gate in the front yard and ran the length of the property to the backyard. This is important later. My mate obviously scored the master bedroom at the front, which lovely vertically opening bay windows faced the front garden and street. I had the next bedroom with a window facing the gravel path fence. And the third bedroom was our study. We lived here for close to 10 months in bliss. Great house, great company, and even though the area was considered a little dicey, the location was stellar. One hot summer night, we said our goodnights, and I hit the hay and zonked out immediately. My housemate stayed up in bed to read for a bit, with her bedside light on. She was doing that for just over an hour before she heard a weird on the front window of her bedroom. Initially, she put it down as an overhanging tree branch, till she realized there was no overhanging tree branch. She sat frozen in fear, blankly staring at her book for what felt like an eternity, till she heard the noise again and again. Slowly looking up, she saw a dude wearing a hoodie trying to open her window, looking her dead in the eyes. She screamed and jumped out of bed and ran straight into my room. I woke up super dazed as she was pulling my hand and whispering, yelling, you know the one, that someone was trying to break in. She had a tendency to be a little overdramatic sometimes, but I swear I've never seen someone look so genuinely terrified. I went to grab my phone to call the cops, but we just went completely still when we heard the distinct crunch of someone walking down the side path of the house. We both rolled off the bed and onto the floor and were completely still. The crunching continued, getting closer to my bedroom window. I don't know what it is about distinct sounds at night when it's otherwise quiet, but it sounded deafening. And then I realized why it was so loud. My fucking window was wide open. I jumped up, slid the window down, and slammed the lock shut just as he reached the window. He looked at me, but he didn't react at all. He just calmly tried to open the window. But when he realized he couldn't, he continued down the pathway to the backyard. I was thoroughly shitting myself now, and my housemate was sobbing in the floor, looking up at me like a bunny about to be torn apart by a fox. I sprinted to the back door to thankfully find it locked and ran back to my room and called the cops. I don't know what the cops knew that we didn't, but they must have broken a land speed record to arrive all of 3 minutes later, lights and sirens on. Saw them go down the side paths, gun drawn, straight to the backyard. There were some noises from the yard, then a knock at the back door a moment later and the police identifying themselves. Turns out the dude had vaulted the back fence, an impressive feat, and another patrol car was headed to the next street over to look for him. The 2 cops at our place asked if we were okay, then asked if they could come in and look around. The cops were honestly amazing. They managed to calm us down whilst making sure all the place was safe. And I was really impressed with how they handled the situation. I offered them a cuppa, which they politely declined as they took our statements, and they asked if there was anyone we could stay with tonight. My housemate and I stayed at her boyfriend's place for a few nights after that, and when we stayed in the house, it was never the same. We felt completely violated and ended up moving out a few weeks later. We never found out if the dude was caught, but there was a random stabbing a few nights after the incident at the train station 2 streets over. If it was related or not, I don't know. But all I can think is that we were so lucky that it went the way it did. If you enjoyed this style of video, make sure to share it with your friends because getting more eyes in front of it helps me know that you guys enjoy it, and make sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you enjoy what I do and want to help support me in doing what I do, make sure you check out my Patron page. You can find a link in the description and you can become a patron and get all your perks for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month. Pretty much nothing. Or you can become a channel member and get yourself some exclusive channel member perks. You can find that information by clicking the join button by the subscribe button. I will catch you all in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye.